Maret Bondorew is our first speaker. Maret is a Rhode Island-based illustrator and lettering artist with work in hundreds of stores throughout the US. Since 2014, she has been a designer at Frog and Toad Press, where she focuses mostly on greeting cards, patches, and prints. In 2020, she designed the iconic Knock It Off t-shirt, immortalizing the words of Governor Gina Raimondo, who is now Secretary Raimondo, amidst the COVID pandemic. Well over 10,000 t-shirts sold, with 42,000 of the proceeds going to support COVID relief in Rhode Island. This project was recognized by the Boston Globe, Forbes, and New York Times. She enjoys eating her way through Providence, who doesn't? Mountain biking and exploring the outdoors with her husband, her son, and her words on that one, dog. Welcome, Maret, and we're excited to have you with us.
Thank you so much. I'm very flattered and humbled to have been invited to participate in this. And yeah, I'm excited to share my story. I think my journey with Frog and Toad is very unconventional. There aren't a lot of mom and pop gift shops that have an in-house illustrator. So yeah, I'll kind of dive into how that all happened. So a few years out of college, I graduated from Hartford Art School, University of Hartford. I studied illustration and art history. So a few years out of college, I found myself unemployed, living in Providence, needing to pay rent. And I started working at Frog and Toad, which was just a quick walk from my apartment. It was like a normal retail gig. I was working there as well as the Jamestown Art Center, which is a great spot. If y'all aren't involved, you should check it out down there. So yeah, I was paying rent, working at Frog and Toad. And while I was there, let me share my screen here. One second. Says I cannot share while, oh, here we go. Lisa, are you sharing the screen?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, the sound, I think.
That's right. How do I stop that? Oh, sorry.
No worries.
Go ahead.
All right, here we go. So working at Frog and Toad. Frog and Toad is a gift shop on the east side of Providence. Not sure if I said that already. But we now have two locations, one on Hope Street and on Westminster Street on the west end as well. It's a quirky gift shop. You can find t-shirts, greeting cards, gifts for basically anyone from your like newborn cousin to your grandma. There's something for everyone there. So I was working at Frog and Toad, and having illustration as a background, I started making signage just around the store, but mainly our A-frame sign that graced, I don't know why this isn't working here. Oh, here we go. That graced our sidewalk. And they were usually very irreverent and kind of like weird, funny, and they usually stemmed from conversations that we had in the back of the store with my coworkers. We were just kind of like riffing and goofing. We're like, what if we wrote this on there? What if we said that John Travolta was going to be our celebrity gift wrapper over Christmas? Cool, great. So yeah, that's kind of, it shows the culture, the work culture at Frog and Toad, which is very special and dear to my heart. So around 2014, I'd been working there for around 2 years. Asher Schofield, who owns the store with his wife, Erin, he was like, we sell a lot of greeting cards. You're an artist. Why don't we just make our own greeting cards and sell them in the store? Like, it's kind of a natural progression. I'm like, cool, let's do it. He's very much a big idea person and go-getter type who's not afraid of failing, which is very important in the creative process. So we went for it. So in 2014, Frog and Toad Press was born. Asher rented a studio space for us in the Nicholson File Artist Studios, which is located in like the Valley District near where that new Farm Fresh facility is by the Steelyard down there. It's a very special place with about 20 other artists plus working there. Yeah, and we got to work making greeting cards. And one thing that is very important to us is that we team up with local printers and manufacturers to make the product for us. So I would be drawing them in the studios, and DWRI, for example, would be letterpress printing all of our cards. Yeah, so there we are, we're making greeting cards, and then we started making patches and pennants. And then in this slide, I show how some of our chalkboard signs made it as greeting cards. So those kind of served as like a little springboard for some of our greeting card designs. Again, showing how we're just not afraid of failing. Some of them are really weird and out there. As far as greeting cards go, like you're not going to find that at CVS exactly. So, so yeah, it's a fun gig when your art director Asher is like, yeah, let's just go for it. Sorry, my dog is whining at me. Yeah. So we were making patches, we were making pins, we're making pennants, tote bags, greeting cards, working with local printers and small manufacturers to get stuff done. And that's always been really important to us. And then not only are we selling these products in our store, but we're also wholesaling them to stores around the country. So we're selling to over 300 stores now across the country and Canada and Australia, all over. So it's kind of crazy how it snowballed into that. We even took it to the National Stationery Show for a few years, which is a trade show in New York City at the Javits Center. We teamed up with Gordon Moss, who's a very skilled carpenter, architect type person. He built us this awesome booth, which you see here. That's myself and Jen. Jen was also working retail at Frog and Toad, and her position kind of changed and evolved to a wholesale account manager for us in the store. Yeah, so that's where you could find us at February 2020. That's like the calm before the storm. And then March 2020 rolls around, and the pandemic hits the country. And Asher calls a team meeting and he's like, y'all, we're gonna have to lay everyone off because like we have to close the store. It isn't safe to have everyone in the store. And I also had an announcement that I was pregnant. So on top of being laid off, I was also expecting a baby in October. So 2020 was a trip for all of us. So with our doors closed, we were, mainly Asher was kind of out there hustling, trying to figure out how to get revenue back into the store. And around that time, Governor Raimondo was having these press conferences, and she's, yelling at all residents of Rhode Island like an Italian grandma, telling us to knock it off. And Asher emails myself and my coworkers and was like, I think we should make that into a t-shirt and donate some of the proceeds to the Rhode Island Foundation. And I was like, I don't know that anyone's going to want to commemorate that time, but like, sure, like you've run a gift shop for 20 years, you know what you're doing. And here are some sketches for the Knock It Off shirt. I designed it in Procreate, which is an app on the iPad, just with the Apple Pencil. I was like struggling through morning sickness in my sweatpants on my couch, like the rest of America working from home. and they were screen printed locally by Parched in Providence. And we just sent it off into the world, and we had no idea. I guess I should say I had no idea, maybe Asher did, that it would take off in the way that it did. So to date, let me see, I have numbers here. We've sold over 12,000 shirts and donated over $48,000 to the Rhode Island Foundation COVID Fund. So yeah, which is pretty amazing. And with that momentum that we had, and all the sales that we had, we wanted to use that momentum to support other small businesses in Rhode Island. Being a small business, we know the importance of like community and like supporting each other, and how tough everyone had it at that time. We weren't the only people to close our doors. So like I said, we teamed up with Parched. Bad Taste also screen printed some stuff for us. We had beer made, Knock It Off beer, which is, when I say that out loud now, it's like, really? That happened? That's crazy. So 3 different beer releases. We had hand sanitizer, coffee with White Electric, and New Harvest roasted that. Yeah, Dave Allen, who's another artist at Nicholson File, made some beautiful mugs for us with our Knock It Off on there. We made scrubs, and yeah, it's a very humbling experience to have made this design, you know, by myself from home, and then send it out into the world and see how well received it could be. Yeah, it's very cool. I think that's true of a lot of designers too, is that, you know, it's a very isolating, sometimes lonely experience designing something by yourself, and then you just release it and see what happens. Yeah, that's my story. I don't know how much time I've used. Maybe I talk quickly, I don't know, but yeah, that's it. I'm excited to hear questions and talk to you all more.
Thanks, Maret. That was great. That's it's so wild to watch. You know, I guess what we all wonder is, how does something go viral? And you never quite know what's going to take off or how that's going to hit in the bigger scheme of things. I guess I want to ask you a question. When you started your talk, you talked about sort of like being afraid to fail or not afraid to fail, and that being sort of a part of putting out beautiful design and beautiful lettering that we had a dialogue around yesterday, and super interesting, catchy sort of phrases. And did you, like, I guess on the flip side, did you, like, what was the room to like fail? Did you feel like there's, like, it's part of succeeding is to take that type of a risk and just, so what if failure happens?
Yeah, what was your question with the with failure? Sorry.
Yeah, so where did the room for sort of exploring designs and exploring opportunity in it, and, you know?
Yeah, I think as far as Frog and Toad Press stuff goes, I think having Asher as kind of the art director behind it, and then making the work myself, I think he's very encouraging person to, I don't know, throw ideas out to me and then for me to make them. Like, there's stuff that we have put out there that I would not have put out there myself if not for him. Like, he's much more risk adverse. So I think having a team that's supportive of crazy ideas is really important to making work. Yeah.
Was there anything that didn't hit the way you guys thought it would?
Early on, Asher had the idea of making a series of greeting cards that were prison themed. I'm sorry. UPS showed up and my dog's barking.
Me? Yeah. Guys, keep adding the questions in the chat. I do see them from Dan, the fail stories.
So one of the prison cards was it was like, I'm sorry, the judge had it out for you. Another one was like 2 words, conjugal visit. So part of it was like joking, but another part of it was kind of raising awareness about like the injustices in the prison system, and like you're not going to buy cards for your friend who's just got parole at CVS. We have a very unique opportunity to make we have a unique opportunity to make cards that like you wouldn't normally be able to make in a larger setting. So when it's just like 2 or 3 of us, we can do whatever we want within, of course, the means that we have. But
right, and you have your own shop, so you're not relying on selling them at like CVS.
Yeah, we can kind of product test in the store too before we like add them to our wholesale line. So I want to see how they do, and we've definitely done that a few times.
I've got a good question here from Melody. Hand lettering is such a lost art. Is it something you learned at school, and how was it taught?
I taught myself. I wasn't doing that in school. I did mostly like watercolor painting, which I guess is kind of similar, training your hands to move a certain way. But yeah, I taught myself through like looking at other people's work and copying it on my own in my own sketchbook, and then looking at different books and stuff, and then kind of making it my own. But yeah, a lot of like repeating the same letter over and over again until I get it to look just how I want it to look.
So when you're working on that, Libby has a question here around what was the inspiration for the font that you used in the Knock It Off? Is there do you see something early on and how you want to sort of like the ratio of the piece, or how do you get inspired?
Yeah, I really like looking at vintage typography and vintage design. I think if a contemporary designer spends too much time looking at like Pinterest, it all kind of looks the same after a while. So for the Knock It Off one, I'm trying to remember what I was looking at in particular, but I think it was like vintage kind of, I wanted it to look like someone's yelling at you, kind of. It's like knock it off, so it has to be bold and
right.
Yeah. So
yeah. Was the anchor anything intentional, just for that the Rhode Island governor?
It was intentional. So anchor for Rhode Island, but anchor also to stay home and anchor yourself where you're at. It's kind of like a subtle thing we slipped in there.
Awesome. I'm gonna pull one more, and then we'll move on to Ramon, and then regroup and have a dialogue between all of us. But Amanda has a question around practicing of this, art that brings together a sense of community. And it does seem like what you've been working on does that, and along with Asher and Frog and Toad, and there's obviously that value is strongly in there. But do you personally plan to continue that? Is that what has driven you during this time, and where do you think you'll go with it?
Yeah, I think at the core of what I do, that's like what makes making art worthwhile, is that kind of community impact. And yeah, on a personal level, well, I feel really fulfilled in what I've been doing at Frog and Toad. But a few years back, I had started this thing called Ladies Drawing Night with a fellow artist, where just fellow ladies got together and drew together. It's as simple as that. And I would love, I was going to start it back up again, and then COVID hit. We had taken a few month hiatus. But yeah, I made some great friends through that community. And I think a lot of connections were made from it. People found different resources and studios, practices through it. So yeah, it's always something that's been important to my practice and makes it worthwhile.
That's great. I actually had heard about your gathering of the Ladies Wrong Night through some ladies that I don't know, it made its way just to the Design by Our Eye area because people found it so great and so valuable, and totally you should bring that back because I know that it's even in the chat, lots of people miss it. So
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Maret. I'm going to introduce our next speaker and keep the questions flowing and in the chat, and I look forward to our conversation all together at the end as well. Okay, so get my notes here. Ramone Kingsley. Super excited to have Ramone with us. Ramone is an industrial designer, maker, inventor, and mentor. For the last 20 years, he's been involved in developing the development of writing instruments, watches, personal luxury accessories, and more in his role as the founder of Kingsley 1945 Watch Company and global design director at AT Cross. As an award-winning designer, Ramone has had the pleasure of speaking internationally and being featured in publications like Harper's Bazaar, Worth Magazine, and the Robb Report. Ramone is a graduate of the Rhode Island School of Design and a mentor and design coach to young professionals and entrepreneurs in the product development field. We're excited to hear from you, Ramone. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Lisa, for the intro. That was quite an intro there. So I just want to let everybody know it's a real pleasure to be here with you guys, and it's my first time doing a Clambake, so I'm always very excited to actually just to listen to all sorts of artists from all walks of from all fields. So so I just want to say thank you also to Tom. Tom Peterson was the one that reached out to me. I think it was on LinkedIn a couple of times, and that's how these things go. So probably after 2-3 weeks, I send them something back, and then I got to meet Lisa. So I think Lisa and I talked for quite a bit. Very nice conversation. So yeah, so I put a little something together. Really was not sure what kind of what the Clambake was going to be like, but Lisa sent me a few things, and I thought, okay, this is kind of very, very cool. So so I'm going to share my screen. Let's see. All right. Can you guys see that? Let's see.
Yes, it's great.
All right, great. So typically, this is so it's kind of cool. I do quite a few conferences and things of this sort. Usually they're more sort of on a particular topic. So here I get an opportunity to kind of, what would it be like if I could just in 15 minutes, if I could kind of capture a few things about my upbringings as actually a painter, and how the hell did I become an industrial designer, or how do I invent stuff, all these kinds of things. So so I wanted to put this little sort of little timeline, and hopefully we'll get through some of these, so many stories, but I figured I'll just start with a few of them, and then we'll just kind of work through it. And that way you can kind of see some of the different things that I've done and how they led into certain things. But I wanted to start with this first, and it's called, start with one small intention. And I don't know if you guys do it. I do this all the time with anything. It could be working out. It could be something you're doing. You start with one small thing, and I think that kind of defines how my career path has gone as an artist, and all these other things that I've done. They've always started with like me trying to do something, and then all of a sudden keeping an open mind, and that compounding into other things, that's usually what I think everything looks like up on top, but that's really how it actually is. So I wanted to put this little diagram because, oftentimes especially when I mentor people in the design or even people outside of design, they'll always sort of hit me up at a point, oh, I hate this. This is meaningless, or, just really frustrated. And a lot of the times is because, sometimes you have to find some intention behind something you do. And I'll give you a perfect example. There's been times in my career where the work I've done is just repetitive, at that point in time, my intention was something else. It was, I'm doing this because I wanted to learn about this thing. So you kind of do something and then you get out of it and you go on to the next step. So I just wanted to share that with you, and then we'll dig in. So I'm actually an immigrant. I was born in Dominican Republic in 1980. And my father was a military figure, and he very much grew up under a dictatorship at the time from the 60s when he was young. So when I was maybe like 3, 4 years old, 5 years old, I was fascinated by it. I was fascinated by, I guess, that kind of a lifestyle of a military person. Just the charisma behind that. As a kid, I started to just collect a lot of, bullet shell case, all these kinds of military things that my father was surrounded by. I kind of ended up sort of by just the nature of it, having a liking for that. And my father's is over here, by the way, this guy over here. So, and then he's not these guys, these are dictators and things like that. But what was interesting was, there was a lot of political turmoil. It was probably around 1985, and there was a lot of immigrants that left the Caribbean to the East Coast and things like that. And for me in particular, it was more, my father's wanting me to just, he was involved with military stuff, so he preferred that I go and, be somewhere where there wasn't so much military turmoil at the time, and try other things. So when I arrived into the U.S. and the East Coast, and I'm going to skip through a few things, but I think I've always had a passion for creating things. And I actually was, I love to draw. I was an artist, still am an artist. And that's pretty much what kept me very focused. There was at that time no real meaning behind it, it's just something that I love to do. So I love to do that more than other things. Kids might be playing or playing video. That's what I love to do. I love to making little cars and painting and drawing. And that's kind of eventually how I went through the school system. I was just kind of an artist, one of those artists, doing really, really well in what I did. And basically that gave me a lot of confidence. And I just kind of stuck with it till ultimately in the late 90s, I got into RISD. And, I still remember to this day getting up to that point, RISD being such when I was young, I was just like, wow, what a great school to be in. And then you get to this place and there's so many different kids. Everybody's very talented, and they're coming from everywhere, all over the US or outside of the US. So to me, it was fascinating to see that. And also it was like an incredibly competitive, you have all these kids that were just used to being sort of their best wherever they're at. And you have this gathering of people coming together. And in RISD in particular, what I really liked about RISD is that this foundation studies that they have, where it doesn't matter if you were a painter or an illustrator or furniture, everybody's starting at the same playing field and sort of getting a foundations for a particular process. And I really, really like that. And I still remember my very first mentor. His name was Alfred de Credico. Some of you may know him. He was a contemporary abstract artist in Rhode Island, very polarizing, very eccentric kind of figure. And at the time, I didn't know why, but it was really interesting to me when I was doing a lot of painting, a lot of abstract painting. I always tried to figure out some of these kind of awkward things that I did, and I never did while I was in college. It never really hit me till like about 10 years later how important some of those things impacted, especially in the field of design when you're inventing things. The way that, doing a drawing in the shower, doing all these crazy things, you're like, why am I doing that? And believe it or not, when you're trying to come up with new things, people that just follow, if you take something and you just follow what others have done, trying to come, you'll never sort of get these sort of breakthrough moments. You almost have to like go outside, go into another field, look at something, and then somehow a lot of inventions, you'll notice that's how they end up coming to be. So I credit all of these sort of inventions that I've done, whether it's in lighting or writing instruments, have come as a result of that experience of not being afraid to, separate from, if you're working on something, just do something else and then come back. So I actually put this together for you guys. This is something I get a lot, which is how the hell did you're a painter? I guess there's a stigma around people that are painters, or and then how do painters become designers? And I was looking through a pile of different things, and I thought this was a nice example of sort of that cycle. Really, the reason I became an industrial designer was, it wasn't just painting. I loved many things, and I think what I found was, in the course of learning art and design, is that I started to make connecting dots. I started to get interested in other things, and then gravitate towards things that I really just felt, maybe felt comfortable with or loved, which was a lot of nature, a lot of things of that sort. And I would bring them into the field of like, mass production, or in this case, like furniture. So that was my real first leap into saying, okay, I can do this. Very interesting. I can take sort of things that I can draw, bring nature to them, and start developing sort of products, and then learning how to make products and manufacture. That process was very fascinating to me. Understanding how, companies did, products that you see when you go to a store and buy things. So that was real fascinating to me. This here happens to be, I think this was probably, while in school, maybe first, second year industrial design. And this was like inspired by pedals. So it's like a coffee table that rotates. But, the original inspiration comes here, and that's kind of a process that I kind of acquired when I was, during my schooling. And then after that, I just really just fell in love with industrial design. I love the idea that you could sort of start with art, sort of productionize it in some sort of way, and then be able to reproduce it for others to enjoy. This kind of some of these were, when I was in school, I had several internships, so I was already working with a lot of different, lighting company. I think the name of the company was Light O'Lear. They were out, I believe, in like Fall River. And I loved it. I went in there, and they would just let me be very creative. And basically, while I was there, I also even helped with some inventions, like the exit signs, like the new exit signs. Before, there used to be exit signs where they're encapsulated. Now you see them in a little piece of plexi. So by polishing that and putting light through it, now all of a sudden you don't need all of this other hardware. So anyways, this was a whole period where I just fell in love with industrial design. And then there came a time, and I think this is very typical of people who are really into industrial design, or go into that particular field, that sort of the everybody, or at least for me, you always want that first experience where you design something, and it's like, wow, you go to like a store, and it's, something that you design somewhere, and then it's like at a store, and it's all over the country. And I think I had that big break-in moment when I believe there was a seminar. It was like, parent company of Gillette and some of these companies. It was really the late 90s, 2000. That was like the height. That's where IDEO and some of these firms were, injection molded plastics, big factories, whether in the US or overseas. It was just a big boom of consumer goods products. And, I just felt fascinated with the idea that companies would hire, I'm an artist, and then I've learned this trade and now I'm working for a big company. And so I got my, so after I graduated, I got my first taste of what that was like. And, the first company that I had already been working and doing internships, but the first company that was a big job for me is I got a job with Newell Rubbermaid, which is kind of a parent company, and it's one of these Fortune 500 companies. Just you name it, they have divisions everywhere. And I was probably 22 at the time, so very young, I would say. Just literally left RISD and then went, and they pay for your living, and then I got to this place, and I'm just like blown away by how crazy this kind of environment is. And I still remember, you'd have these sort of CEOs coming in a private jet, and to me, I thought that was just incredible to see. I can't believe, this company this is based around, products, and then all these different departments. So I think that experience, I was probably there for 3 years or so, but a lot of things that I wanted to, I wanted to have a product that was out on shelves. I wanted, to design something that was for for everyone to enjoy. This in particular, this is, I'll just share some of these little things. These are office helpers is what I used to call them. And basically they're little office products for, to make your sort of, just liven up your space at the office. So there are these little magnetic figures that you could, just lighten up your day at the office. And pretty much a lot of the stuff that I did then was in the area of houseware. So it was a little bit more on the furniture side. And I always actually had a knack for metal stuff. But this, while I was there, I got to experience so many things, even just the younger guys, the younger kids. I was the new kid, so all the work, that falls under my lap. The risky trips. At one point, I went to a trip to Mexico, and I remember, I think it was like the corporate job. I was like the only guy in there, and I don't know if you guys know Durango, Mexico. That's like where, they have the big cartels and stuff. And I still remember to this day driving because I needed to go and see a wood factory that was making millions of actually picture frames that, when you go to like a Target or a Container Store. But what was interesting there is that because of that trip, I actually invented, along with a few other guys, when a company's doing things at that scale, even little things on a picture frame, like the little nail that holds them together, when you're doing millions of these things, it's like thousands of pounds and tons of money. And I don't have it here, but there's this product called Level Line, which it's actually for women. It was marketed for women, but it's a beautiful product for everyone. And it was just a little bubble, like a self-leveling bubble, and it was made out of an injection molded plastic. And I remember the way picture frames are made, they go through this sort of planer that has a profile, and that's how you get the profiles on the frame. So I had asked them to flip that piece of wood to put like a little channel into it. And what that did is it allowed this sort of little plastic device that was like a penny. You can take a thumbtack and put it on the wall, and then now all of a sudden you can take any picture frame and it would just hang on the wall, and then you could move it. And then now you didn't have to use, nails and all these things to hold them. So that was my very first sort of big taste of what that was like, and how companies, what they do with those kinds of things, and how they sort of spin, they'll take once you patent an idea becomes, takes up steam, and how, all that whole environment. So those 3 years were just very, very intense. I mean, I learned a lot very quickly. And I think after having that experience, I think I there comes a time, at least in my career, where depending on what kind of things you have, you try to find a meaning or a purpose, um, for what you really want to do in your life. And I think after fulfilling some of these things, I wanted to have a product, I want to do this, I realized that, I wanted to take a lot of what I've learned, eliminate the things that I don't like, and focus on things that I really liked about that. And on top of that, add, for example, with me, I was always loved jewelry and metals. And, there came a time where, after reflecting on all of the things I did and enjoy, I wanted to basically, in particular, I wanted to learn more about brands. Why do brands, how come some brands are more expensive than other? What is it about that? Because the environment I was coming from was a little bit more of a, some of it's branding, but some of it is just a consumable. So it's a little bit of a different approach to it. Um, so I took this job, and it happened to be, I was in Texas, by the way, when I left RISD. I went to Texas and lived there for 3.5 years or so. And along came a bunch of other jobs to go to and fly to India and be in India to do like furniture and things like that. And I actually decided to go for something that was smaller, sort of a family owned type of brand with heritage to it. And for me, Cross was perfect because they were in the jewelry, they were dealing with metals and sort of handheld. So to me, that was very close to what I really, just things that I'm passionate about. And so that was, so I started at Cross. And really what Cross has done for me is really refined a lot of different things that I learned from being sort of in a smaller company setting and seeing how the dynamics of that work, and just these are some of the products that I've designed while at Cross. And what was cool about that was that I learned other things, not just sort of designing pens, but for example, just I got the opportunity to travel quite a bit all over the world, just sourcing, like going to France to look at a lacquer, going to Switzerland to look at, we got into watches for a little while and cufflinks. We would look at India for leather goods, here in the US as well. So I got an opportunity to, it just opened up my eyes to seeing all of these different kinds of things, all of these different kinds of manufacturers of goods, and then how that all kind of came together. And then after that came together, sort of another group of people, a marketing department, and then you have the creative and a branding. So all of these things have to work in sort of symphony to get this sort of product to have a personality to it. And I really, I think that really impacted me in terms of like understanding, the value of products and the meaning behind certain things you do. So Cross has given me an opportunity to really refine all of those sort of skill sets. Till eventually what happened is, let me see, and I have, so there's a ton of other products and things. So but I wanted to just pick a few. There was a point where I was just gonna, I told the leadership, I'm gonna take off on my own because I love collecting vintage things, altimeters, and I started this little sort of hobby of making watches, taking altimeters and applying some of the things that I had learned just from traveling to like Switzerland and learning about things that I was just interested in. And there came a point in time where it just kind of started to pick up steam. And at that point in time, it was not even Cross or me doing, working on it. Just for me, design, it just, I eat, sleep, and breathe that. There is no separation for me. And I pretty much made that clear. And till this day, I do both. I'm a director for them. I manage some of their products. I design the products, and I also do my own. I work on my own brand and kind of develop that at the same time. So I'll share some of that. So this is just a picture of me. This is actually at the Promenade. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Foundry. So the Foundry, for my studio, so the Foundry had a sort of like a little spot at 255 Promenade that where they used to make the calipers, and it happened to be the same calipers I use when I was a designer. So I said I have to have. So I had this sort of space, and I kind of created my. That's where I created my studio. And basically, here are just some other pictures. I'll tell you a little bit about. These are just some close-ups of like some parts and things like that. But I'll tell you a little bit about, like, for example, how I actually started. How I actually just started sort of making, why is it a watch, or why is it 1945? So the reason behind a lot of these things is just like my mother. I'm sort of a vintage, we have this knack for going and shopping at like vintage shops, like on, in Rhode Island. There's a ton on Wickenden Street. So I'd go there and I actually buy, I love buying just military stuff, like aircraft gauges, all sorts of things like that. To me, I just love that. Bomber jackets, and actually the very first watches that I started to make, I started to play around with sort of what those dial gauges would look like. And then for straps, I would just literally, I would cut up the jackets of these bomber jackets. And the initial first samples that I've done, they're like that. And that's kind of why the brand itself has sort of a tan look to it. It's really because of those sort of bomber jackets. And then the bulkiness of it, it just more resembles like gauges as you would see them on an aircraft. And then the cigar thing, that's an interesting thing. Actually, a lot of the people that were supporting me at the time, and people were just really, really like watches. That's where they would hang out at, as a cigar, at cigar bars. And that's where you would connect, and people would talk about, they'd be sipping coffee or cigars, and they'd be talking about their watches as well. And the actual packaging for these watches is cigar box. So all of it really has to do with just this passion that I have, and then refining a lot of things that I've learned in my life in design, art, and just taking the best of the best things that I think. And that's what Kingsley is. Kingsley is more of a thing that people can connect through like a timepiece. And it's really cool. A lot of the photography here. This is there's a local photographer that's phenomenal. And he used to do he does some work for various companies. His name is John Doucette. We've done several shoots, and what I liked about it was he really had his own vision as to how he envisioned, sort of the look of this. And it's really great to sort of let someone kind of do their thing. Because I've been in those shoes where someone may have a vision for something, but when you're actually creating something, it gets it's a little bit tricky. So it's more about having two people being in sync, and then seeing what comes of it. So Kingsley is more about that. It's totally different than maybe my first career, where it's all about trying to get retailers or being in stores. I really don't care about any of that. And till I have the brand, it'll be just what it is. A place for people to connect, to have fun, and just continuing to develop these kind of timepieces. And then these are, as the brand as the brand sort of continues to progress, a lot of things that I've tried. There's a lot of member events that I have where, I'll have people come together to look at cars. Also these vintage briefcases. I literally, I have 7 stores, and all the in retail, when you go and you put product on retail, there's a particular square footage that you get, and you have to go and buy. And I just scrapped all of that, and I went and bought like these vintage briefcases. And that's what I use. That's how my that's how these Kingsley watches are presented. So all of those things were just kind of cool. And I think the fact that it's not sort of a business seed type of a brand where I'm free to do whatever I want. So, you know, when you go to a store and you see something so different, it's because there's no bureaucracy or behind it. It's just sort of just a vision being projected out. So I don't know how much time I have left, Lisa, but I might be able to share. I have like a 2-minute video that I can just put up there if you guys see.
We are pretty close to our 7 o'clock time, which means we might not have as much time for.
That's cool. Let's just leave it like that. I actually ended up putting some of these in there in replacement of that. So.
Okay, awesome.
So that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Ramon. That was amazing.
Thank you.
Well, as I mentioned, we have just a couple minutes, but we'd love to hear your questions. And I have a question I want to kick us off with, actually. You know, you touch on this, what I want to call a circular process of creativity. And I think organizationally, we've really tried to, you know, almost like speak to that. I don't know that many people, many people's careers ended up the way they thought they were going to be when things started, right? But I guess so as creative people, you are creating as your profession, but then your lives are also very creative. They're creatively built, right? So I guess my question though is there any time in that process that you know where you're headed, like so that you that as much as it's swerving everywhere, you still know where you're going to land? Or is there something that sort of is still the ground that keeps that not going off course?
Yeah, so no, it's more of a feeling, you know, every day that I do something, or for example, I'll give you an example. If it's, for example, for the watches or something, I may have a particular idea because I wanted to I wanted to connect, you know, a few people together, and I designed this particular thing. And what happens is I'll get very motivated to do that, and I'll do that. And I don't know what's going to come of that. As a matter of fact, till this day, even when I do meetings or things, I do not know what the outcome is going to be. But what I do know is just I have a sort of a good sort of a manifestation or a feeling about it, because what I'm doing is more. I'm putting all of the things that I'm passionate about, whatever that may be, into this thing, and then it's more of an exciting thing to see what happens after that, and then sort of see you know, once we get there, then I kind of decide.
Yeah, so maybe that's more what it is. And even back to, you know, our question with Maret was around failure, right? And maybe part of that creative process is the instinct that, or the vision, or the catalyst or the instigator, the original reason to just go for it, even if you don't know where it's going to land.
Yeah.
And maybe sometimes it doesn't work, but you learn from that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely will say that any sort of leaps of things that are really enjoyable to me as time progresses have been the result of some sort of a hiccup, or man, I tried that. Why did I do? You know, it's always, I think I see more things I enjoy as a result of some sort of a failure or trying something, for sure.
Did you always know you wanted to be your own entrepreneur?
No, I just had an interest. I just had a growing interest in, you know, still do. I just have a growing interest in things. I'll do something, and you know, there comes a time where it either that sort of splits into other little things, and I think as a person, I'm kind of one of those kinds of people where there's something that I've always loved. For example, at heart, no matter what, I'm a designer. So if you were to put me in a big company and I'm like it's just not going to work because I want to, I'm a designer at heart. I have to feel, that uh, that's satisfying to me. So I start there, and then from there I find other satisfying things, and that may lead to different routes.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Libby has a
Painting
question in
was
here.
satisfying to me for a while, and then that turned into furniture was satisfying. And so many things have been satisfying to me, but they keep branching out. Um,
Yep. Yeah, that's the evolution. Like we're all evolving people,
mhm.
and we grow, even if we're doing similar work throughout our entire career. There's always something evolving in that. Some people spread horizontally, some people go deeper, right?
Yeah.
How much time do you spend between cross work and Kingsley 1945?
Just all of it. That's all I do. Pretty
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. So it's not, are you bouncing around inspiration between, are you still inspired with your work at Cross that then influences your own watch designs and vice versa? Is there any kind of play between the two?
I think probably on the metal side, because obviously you've got two metal companies. There's definitely there's definitely bridge there, but for the most part, I mean, really amazing designs I've done for pens have been inspired. It's me. Just they're inspired by things that have to do with me, and amazing metal finishes have been inspired by something I may have done on for a company. So it's kind of just a web. It's not, depends on how yeah, it's not fixed. I don't look at life like, okay, now I'm going to go to the other. There was a time where I did that. And then I just said, I'm not going to do that anymore. But it took a long time because it's almost a rites of passage to be able to just make that kind of a leap. But for me, I think you have to really, even if you're trying to do a brand, that's not something you just wake up one day, oh, I'm going to do it. Or is, someone who's not really, you almost have to eat, sleep, and breathe this kind of stuff. So.
Yeah. I have a question here from Boris, who is a student at RISD, fascinated by watches and intricate objects, and would love to know if your travels, which you mentioned earlier, and we understand from your work that you've traveled a lot, how much does that influence your watch designs?
So I'm probably going to answer, I'm probably going to answer Boris specifically. So
that's good.
Obviously in the there. So one of the things I've noted, so in the business of watches, there's not just the, obviously the outside of the watch, but the internals. In the world of watches, there's digital watches, there's automatic watches, mechanical watches, all sorts of watches on the inside. And a lot of people think that these things, even a company that says everything's made and it's impossible. There are certain things that are just not achievable. For example, in the United States. So you have to go to either Japan or Switzerland. Many companies that do these sort of movements that then they sell. So if you're someone who's looking to start a watch company and you travel, you go to a trade show or you go to Switzerland, and you may in your mind have a particular perception of something you want. You go to these big manufacturers of these parts, and they'll just, it's almost like buying an engine and then you got to build around it. So I think for me it was the other way around. My watches to me is not about how precise time is. I just look at my iPhone for that. It's more about the ability for people to connect with each other. How cool, that I took a bomber strap to make the strap, or that the metal itself. And then as that starts to grow and the thing starts to look really good, and you're like, okay, well, I got to make sure it works really well. That to me now becomes secondary, which that's a 50-50. Some hardcore watch people, they're more about maybe just parts and looking at that aspect of it. And other people, like, and for myself, it's more about feeling and it's more about the it's more about what that does for someone.
Yeah, that's great.
I don't know.
So
I think I answered it a little bit.
I am going to see where Maret is. She's still with us.
Hello.
Hello. Oh, good. So we are over our time, but I wanted to bring you back up and ask one last question that will tie in a final question we have in the chat from Erica. So to both of you, so I don't want to presume too much here, but what I do feel like is Ramon has had some evolutions of his career, and Maret, you're beginning those evolutions, right? Like they're starting to do this thing that Ramon's almost described, and there's two sides. There's kind of like this place that I want us to meet in the middle around, and it has to do with advice and mentorship. And like what would you both say? And maybe Ramon, what would you say to your younger self? And
Well,
Maret, what do you want to say to your older self? Kind of in terms of the evolution around design and I'll have Ramon go first. And
yeah, so actually, I'll just say, because I was listening to Maret actually before we had this meeting yesterday, and then today, I think Maret brought it up. She has a very good relationship. For example, is it Asher? I think.
Asher.
Yep.
Yeah. So, the most important thing, at least for me, or the best advice I can give, is the culture around who you work with really, really plays a big impact as to how you end up. The kind of sort of things that you end up doing, your whole outlook on particular things. And I noticed that it sounds like Mary's in a good place because of the culture that is in the environment that she's in. And I would say it's always good to seek those kinds of environments, create them if you can create them, seek them, and continue to pursue that, because it puts you in a state of just more confidence and feeling more purposeful every day when you're doing something. I think that's probably hands down what has helped me out the most as I like switch and evolve and try all these kind of different things. So,
Maret, what would you say to your, or what, either way, what do you want to say to your older self? Or what do you think your older self would say to you after some years?
Yeah, it's hard to say, but you were talking about, shifting in your career, and Ramon has gone down so many different paths. I think I'm at a point of that right now in my life, having a baby in October. My time has shifted so much. My time is so precious, and I think going forward, the projects that I take on need to be ones that are meaningful to me and that are fulfilling. And that's maybe not always like the next freelance project. I've unfortunately had to turn down some in this season of my life. But projects that are personally fulfilling and that I'm able to play with, because that's where like the good stuff comes from in design and making art, is when you're able to just be loose and play. And so I think kind of looking into my future as an illustrator and designer, loosening up and doing work that I enjoy and seeing where that leads to, because usually that does lead to something good. I think that's what it's looking like, or what I'm going to try to do. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I think that brings us back, like, full circle of, something that I feel like we've heard tonight is just, that's creativity, right? That's the, starting down a path with some intention, some sense of potential, but not really knowing the answer in the end. but letting that creative process reveal it, which is pretty great. Thank you both for being with us. It was so great to hear from you and for you to share your stories.